Her side of the bed was untouched, the sheets stretched tight and smooth, a cold sheet of white fabric that somehow felt louder than any fight we'd ever had. I sat there in the low light of our Seattle penthouse, watching the sunrise spill across the skyline, while my phone stayed dead on the marble island. No texts. No missed calls. Just the quiet horror of a GPS dot sitting still at a downtown hotel. I didn't yell. I didn't break down. I just understood, all at once, that the life I thought I had ended the second the clock hit 4 in the morning. If you've ever been pulled into those quiet moments where love finally snaps for good, stay with me, because this is where the truth starts showing itself. The apartment felt heavy, like the air itself had weight. It was 5:17 a.m. outside, the rain against the floor-to-ceiling windows had gone from a soft rhythm to a steady, dull hum, smearing the city lights into gray streaks. I sat on the edge of the California king bed, my bare feet pressed against the cold hardwood. To my left, her side stayed perfectly flat, clean, untouched. Isla wasn't dead. I knew that much. If something had happened, the police would have called hours ago. If she'd been stuck somewhere, she would have texted. If her phone died, she would have borrowed a charger. I stared at my phone on the nightstand anyway. The screen stayed black. No notifications. No, I'm on my way. No, don't worry. Just nothing. I stood up, moving slow, like my body hadn't gotten the message yet. I walked into the kitchen, the marble island glowing under the cabinet lights. I didn't make coffee. Grinding beans felt like a habit for someone who still had a future. I felt like a man whose timeline had been cut clean in half. I opened my laptop. The tracking app Isla and I shared, something we joked about, like insurance against bad situations, loaded on the screen. Her blue dot wasn't moving. It hadn't moved since 2 a.m. It showed a location downtown, unchanged for hours. I closed the laptop. The sound cracked sharply through the empty space. I didn't feel the urge to drive over there. I didn't want to scream or smash the crystal vase on the dining table. Instead, this strange cold clarity settled in. The kind you get when a doctor finally confirms what you already knew. The waiting was done. The wondering about her distant looks and careful messages was done. I walked into the master closet. Her perfume, sandalwood and jasmine, hung in the air, sharp and mocking. I reached up and pulled my leather weekender bag off the top shelf. I packed slowly and on purpose. 5 shirts. 2 suits. Underwear. Socks. Toiletries. I left the watch she gave me for our anniversary. I left the framed photo from our honeymoon in Como. I took only what belonged to me, what I had before there was an us. It took 20 minutes to undo 5 years of marriage. At the front door, I stopped. The elevator was already waiting. I'd ordered an Uber to the airport. I didn't want the car. I wanted to disappear. But I needed to leave something behind, not a fight. She loved a fight. A fight meant I still cared enough to bleed. A fight would give her room to explain, to twist things, to cry until I gave in. I went back to the kitchen island and pulled out a sheet of thick, cream-colored stationery. I uncapped my fountain pen. Black ink. I wrote 2 sentences. I didn't sign my name. I set the note in the middle of the marble island, right beside her spare keys. It was the only thing in the room that wasn't perfectly lined up. I capped the pen, grabbed my bag, and walked out. The electronic lock beeped as it sealed the apartment behind me. As the elevator dropped, I checked my phone one last time. 5:58 a.m. sunrise. Up in the penthouse, the silence settled back in, circling the note that waited for her with quiet menace. I know where you were. Don't bother coming to find me. The elevator doors later slid open with a soft chime that probably sounded way too loud to her. It was 8:15 a.m. Isla stepped into the private foyer, leaning against the wall for a second to steady herself. Sunlight poured through the east-facing windows, harsh and unforgiving. She smelled like a long night out, champagne lingering in the air. Her skin looked tight, worn. Her makeup was probably smeared at the corners, even though she'd tried fixing it in a hotel bathroom mirror. I could picture her taking a breath, slipping on the mask she wore best, the unlucky victim. She had the story ready. A long night at the gala. Didn't want to drive. Phone died. Charger missing. Slept in a guest room at a friend's place. It was a weak lie, full of holes. But she knew me. She expected to find me on the gray Italian sofa, arms crossed, jaw locked. Angry. She would cry. Apologize. Promise it meant nothing. Eventually I'd soften. I'd make coffee, give her a lecture about safety, and we'd move on. That was our routine. She opened the door and called out, "Adrian?" Her voice cracked. She tried again, quieter. "Ah, day. I'm so sorry, my phone." She stopped. The apartment wasn't quiet like someone sleeping. It was empty in a way that felt staged, like a model unit. No coffee smell. The espresso machine sat cold and dark. I never skipped coffee. Her heels clicked across the hardwood, the sound echoing too sharply off the walls. The couch was untouched, cushions perfect. That's when the unease crept up her spine. She probably told herself I'd gone into the office early. That I was punishing her with distance. And for the first time, that explanation didn't quite feel right. She could deal with me giving her the cold shoulder. That part didn't scare her. She headed down the hallway toward the master bedroom to change, already thinking about scrubbing the 4 seasons off her skin before I came back. She pushed the double doors open. The bed was made. I never made the bed. I like things clean, sure, but I always left the sheets loose to let them breathe. Something my mother drilled into me years ago. Today, the duvet was pulled tight, smooth as a blank page. She frowned and walked toward the closet, unzipping her dress as she went. "Did the cleaner come early?" she muttered. She flicked on the closet light. The breath left her body all at once. My side of the closet, my side, was wrecked. The neat line of color-matched suits was broken by empty spaces where my favorites used to hang. The shelf that held my folded cashmere sweaters was stripped bare. The floor told the rest of the story. Where my dress shoes and loafers usually sat, there were only faint outlines in the dust. It wasn't completely empty. I hadn't taken everything. The winter coats were still there. The old tuxedos. The things that didn't matter. I'd taken what I actually used. I'd taken the life I lived. "No," she whispered. The word sounded foreign, like it didn't belong to her mouth. "No, no, no." She spun around and rushed back into the main living area, panic finally overpowering the hangover. She checked the bathroom. My toothbrush was gone. She checked the entryway. My favorite coat wasn't on the rack. She ran into the kitchen, her hands shaking hard enough that she knocked one of the decorative bowls slightly out of place. That's when she saw it. The note. It sat dead center on the marble island, held down by the weight of her spare set of keys, the ones I'd left behind on purpose. The cream-colored paper stood out against the dark stone. She stared at it, frozen, afraid to touch it. Touching it made it real. Touching it meant the story she'd practiced in the elevator didn't matter anymore. Her fingers trembled as she picked it up. My handwriting stared back at her, sharp, angled, precise. "I know where you were. Don't bother coming to find me." The room tilted. She grabbed the edge of the island, her knuckles bleaching white. I didn't just suspect. I knew. The lie about Lila. The dead phone. The harmless mistake. All of it collapsed under that single sentence. She pulled her phone from her clutch, ignoring the low battery warning, and called me. It didn't ring. "The subscriber you have called has been disconnected or is no longer in service." She tried again. Same message. Slowly, she lowered the phone. The silence rushed back in, louder than before. She looked around at the spotless, expensive walls of the life she thought she had and understood something new. Without me, it wasn't a home. It was just a container. And she was alone inside it. She slid down the cabinets until she hit the floor, the note crushed in her fist as the morning sun lit up the wreckage. The room I was sitting in smelled like lemon cleaner and recycled air. It was a standard hotel near Seattle-Tacoma, the kind of place built for people passing through, flight crews, and anyone trying to disappear. The carpet was a dizzying mix of brown and beige, nothing like the hand-woven rugs upstairs. I sat at the small laminate desk while the mini fridge hummed behind me and my laptop keys clicked in the quiet. My phone was still off. Instead, I'd bought a prepaid burner from a lobby kiosk. Cheap plastic. Felt like a toy in my hand. I hadn't given the number to anyone. On my laptop screen, our shared financial life was laid out cleanly in rows and columns. I wasn't doing this out of spite. That's what I told myself. I was doing it because it needed to be done. I'm an architect. When a structure is compromised beyond repair, you don't slap paint over the cracks. You condemn the building. I opened our joint checking account. I transferred exactly half of the liquid funds into my personal account, the one I'd kept untouched since before the wedding. I didn't take more than my share. I wasn't stealing. Next, I logged into the credit card portal. The American Express Platinum. Right at the top of pending charges. The Four Seasons, Seattle. $489. 11:42 p.m. I stared at it longer than I expected. She hadn't just stayed out late. She'd planned it enough to check in. Or maybe he had. The thought cut sharp, but I didn't react. I clicked report lost or stolen under my name and froze the authorized user card. Hers. Across the city, Isla paced the length of the living room, her phone clenched in her hand like it might save her. She was past crying now. This was the frantic phase, the manic problem-solving. Pick up, she hissed after ending yet another call to voicemail. You stubborn bastard. Her emotions flipped fast. First guilt. Then anger. How dare I disappear without a conversation? After 5 years? It was cruel. Immature. She decided I was overreacting. It was one night. A mistake. Too much wine. A moment of weakness fueled by attention from a man who listened instead of criticizing her gallery choices. She opened her messages, ready to send something sharp enough to force a reply. You're being dramatic, Adrian. We need to talk like adults. Where are? A notification slid down the screen. Not from me. From the bank. Alert, authorized user card ending in 8802 has been suspended by the primary account holder. She stopped walking. She stared at the screen, frozen. The air in the room felt thin, almost suffocating. Suspended. Not cancelled. Just suspended. It was a power move. A leash being yanked tight. Another notification pinged. Alert, wire transfer of $145,000 processed from joint checking to external account. Her phone slipped from her fingers, thudding softly against the plush rug. The reality of what had just happened hit her harder than any hangover, heavier than the guilt weighing on her chest. This wasn't a fight. It wasn't a short separation, or he'd crash at a friend's place for a few nights until she said the right words. He wasn't just leaving, he was erasing her. Meanwhile, in a hotel room far from her, Adrian closed his laptop. He rubbed at his eyes, the adrenaline finally giving way to exhaustion. He felt a phantom vibration in his pocket, the ghost of his old phone, the ghost of her calling. He stood and walked to the window. Below, all he could see was a parking lot and the gray ribbon of the highway. Ugly. Yet perfect. He peeled off the shirt he'd worn when he'd walked out on his old life and stepped into the sterile bathroom. He turned the shower knob all the way to cold. He needed to be numb. He needed to wash away her scent from his skin before sleep could claim him. Because sleep meant dreams, and in dreams, forgiveness might creep in. And forgiveness, he knew, was a luxury he couldn't afford. Under the icy water, he made no sound. Back at the gallery, the space was a cavern of white walls and polished concrete, designed to make both the art and the people look expensive. It was opening night for Urban Solitude, a title Isla wore like a personal barb. She lingered near a massive abstract canvas, gripping a flute of champagne she hadn't touched, her smile pinned in place. "Isla, darling." The voice was high-pitched, sharp, dripping with faux concern. Isla turned to see Naomi, a woman whose charity work mostly masked a talent for gathering every scrap of gossip in her zip code. "Naomi," Isla said, leaning in for the air kiss. "You look stunning. That dress is vintage, isn't it?" Naomi's eyes flicked over Isla's shoulder, scanning the room, hunting. "But where's Adrian? I don't think I've ever seen you at an opening without him. He usually loves this artist." Isla's heart hammered. She'd rehearsed this. Practiced the line in front of the mirror until it sounded bored, casual. "Oh, you know. Adrian," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "Emergency site visit in Vancouver. Some structural issue with the new high-rise." He was devastated to miss this. Naomi's smile never wavered, but her eyes narrowed. "Vancouver? That's odd. Elias saw his car at the long-term lot at Seattle-Tacoma yesterday. I thought maybe he was flying to New York." The lie stuck in Isla's throat. The gallery seemed to shrink around her. The ambient music, meant to feel sophisticated, suddenly slammed into her like noise. "He flew out of Seattle-Tacoma to get to Vancouver. It was a last-minute flight," she improvised, voice rising a notch. "Of course," Naomi said, holding her gaze a beat too long. "It's a shame. We were all hoping to ask him about the rumors." "Rumors?" Isla's grip on her champagne glass tightened so hard she feared the stem might snap. "Oh, nothing," Naomi said lightly, brushing Isla's arm, a touch that felt like ice. "Just talk. You know how people get when they don't see the golden couple together for 48 hours. They're saying he looked intense when he left the firm on Tuesday." Isla felt the walls close in. The reds and blacks of the paintings blurred together. They knew. They suspected. In their world, silence was guilt, absence was confession. Adrian wasn't just gone, his absence was a void, sucking all the air from the room, leaving Isla gasping. "Excuse me," she said, pulling away. "I need to say hello to the curator." She didn't. Instead, she strode toward the ladies' room, head high, ignoring the glances that cut like knives. Inside, she locked herself in a stall, pressing her forehead to the cool marble. Her phone vibrated in her clutch. She pulled it out, heart hoping against hope. Maybe he'd cooled off. Maybe he'd texted to say he was coming home. It was an Instagram notification. Someone had tagged her in a photo from the event. "Beautiful night at the gallery. Missing core Adrian Crossarch, hope the trip goes well. Solo Isla. Naomi." The winking emoji stung like a slap. Isla stared at the screen, thumbs hovering. She wanted to scream, to tell everyone to go to hell. But she couldn't. She was trapped, a prisoner in the life she'd built, the perfect wife, the perfect life, the perfect lie. She sank onto the closed toilet lid, her designer dress bunching around her waist. Adrian hadn't just broken her heart. He'd left her defenseless, swimming in a tank of sharks, and had taken the only weapon she'd ever had, his protection. Her thumb hovered over his name and her contacts. She knew it wouldn't go through. She knew he had erased himself. But she pressed it anyway. The call went through not to him, but to his firm's emergency line, patched through by a terrified assistant sworn to secrecy about his location. "Mr. Cross?" The assistant's voice trembled over the line. "It's Swedish Medical Center. They say your wife collapsed at a restaurant. They couldn't reach her phone." Adrian didn't remember walking to the rental car. He didn't remember the rain-slick streets of First Hill under his feet. His body had gone on autopilot, running on routines forged over the last 5 years. Isla was in trouble. Fix it. Now he sat in the idling sedan, windshield wipers chopping the night in a rhythmic, almost hypnotic beat. The red neon of the ER entrance reflected in puddles on the asphalt, bleeding like an open wound. It was 11 p.m. The rain fell without mercy, drumming on the metal roof, enclosing him in a bubble of noise and isolation. She was just inside, through the sliding glass doors, past the security desk, down a hallway that smelled of antiseptic and fear. The nurse on the phone had called it a suspected cardiac event, but Adrian knew the code, a panic attack so overwhelming it shut everything down. He'd seen it before. He knew how her hands curled like claws. He knew the hitching gasps, the wild roll of her eyes. For 5 years, he'd been the anchor. The paper bag in her hands. The trembling back rubbed until the shaking stopped. The whispered promise that the world wasn't ending. His hand brushed the door handle. Cold plastic. Cheap. If he stepped through those doors, Isla would win. Not in a cruel way, it was clinical observation. Because the moment he walked in, her wide, tear-filled eyes would hit him like gravity. She wouldn't be the woman who betrayed him in a hotel room anymore. She'd be the fragile bird needing rescue. And he would no longer be the man holding his dignity. He would be her husband, the one who abandoned his sick wife. He'd hold her hand. She'd apologize. He'd say it's okay. And the cycle would restart. The betrayal would be buried under the weight of her trauma, reduced to just another bump in their complicated life. He stared at the sliding doors. In his mind, he imagined her lying on a gurney, hooked to monitors that beeped with a perfectly healthy heart, panicking over the chaos she had created. She wasn't dying. She was overwhelmed by the consequences he had forced on her alone. And that, he thought, was the point. She had to carry it. If he went in and lifted the weight for her, she would never understand how heavy it really was. His knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. The urge to rush to her burned in his chest. It felt like love, but tasted like poison. God, he wanted to be the hero. But heroes save people from danger. Going in wouldn't save her. It would only enable the version of her that believed actions had no consequences. Not this time, he whispered to the dashboard. The sound startled him. He shifted the car into reverse. The backup camera flickered, showing the empty, rain-slicked pavement behind him. He didn't glance at the ER entrance again. The red neon grew smaller in the rearview mirror until he turned the corner and it disappeared into the wet Seattle night. He drove back to the hotel. The silence in the car felt less like emptiness and more like armor. The house was too quiet. Since returning from the hospital, Isla moved through it like a ghost, haunting her own life. The doctors called it exhaustion. She knew it was the body's response to a silence she couldn't fill. It was Thursday afternoon. Gray Seattle light filtered through the blinds of Adrian's home office, a space Isla rarely entered. Once, it had been his domain, blueprints, drafting tables, the scent of graphite and cedar. Now it was just another empty room he'd left behind. Isla stepped inside. Bare feet sinking into the vintage Persian rug. She told herself she was searching for financial documents, some thread to navigate the maze of frozen accounts. But she knew the truth. She was looking for a reason. A secret bank account. A hidden letter. Anything to make him the villain, so she could stop feeling like the monster. She sat in his leather chair. It creaked, a sound so familiar it made her chest ache. His desk remained immaculate, always. A stack of moleskin notebooks rested in the corner. She lifted the top one. Not a sketchbook. A planner. Flipping to the current month, she saw notes in his jagged architectural script. Not client meetings or site inspections, personal reminders, care plans. Osea 12. Call Dr. Lennox regarding Isla's anxiety prescriptions. Check interactions. Osea 14. Look into the gallery lease renewal. Surprise her with the deposit? Octi 15. Dinner at the pink door. Don't talk about work. Ask about the installation. Her breath caught. She remembered that dinner. Sitting across from him, sneaking texts under the table, complaining about how boring Adrian was, how obsessed with logistics. Reading the notes now, she realized the logistics were just his way of loving her. Her hand trembled as she moved a stack of blueprints. Beneath them, a thick manila folder labeled simply Viterbo. She frowned. Viterbo, a small town in Italy from their honeymoon. Inside, not memories, but a proposal. On top, a printed email draft addressed to the senior partners of his firm. Subject line: resignation, sabbatical request. Effective November 1st, I will be stepping down from the lead architect position. As discussed, the demands of the firm have come at a personal cost I am no longer willing to pay. My wife and I need time. I plan to take the next 12 months to rebuild the foundation of my family. November 1st. That was next week. Isla stared at the date on the draft, her vision blurring. The letter was stamped with the morning of the gala, the same morning she decided to sleep with someone else because she felt unseen. Because she told herself she was alone. Beneath the letter sat printed real estate listings. A weathered stone farmhouse in Viterbo. A modest studio with tall, north-facing windows, perfect light for an art director who wanted to paint again. One listing was circled in red ink. Beside it, in his handwriting, were 2 words. For Isla. No cell service. A sob tore out of her, raw and uncontrolled. He hadn't been pulling away. He'd been clearing space. Quietly. Carefully. Lining up an escape hatch for their marriage. He had been preparing to walk away from the career she resented him for, just to give her what she said she needed. While he searched for farmhouses in Italy to save them, she was booking a hotel room downtown to destroy everything. The folder slipped from her hands. Papers scattered across the desk, spreading out like a blueprint for a future that would never exist. The story she'd built to survive, the lonely wife, the cold husband, collapsed in an instant. There was nothing left to defend. Only the brutal clarity of what she had done. She folded forward, pressing her forehead to the cool mahogany surface of his desk. And for the first time since he'd left, she didn't cry for herself. She cried for the man who had loved her enough to quit the world only to learn she wasn't worth quitting it for. The conference room on the 42nd floor smelled like stale coffee and expensive leather. It was designed to feel neutral, stripped of emotion, a place where lives were reduced to numbers and signatures. Beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, Seattle dissolved into its usual gray drizzle, the skyline blurred and distant. Adrian arrived first. He took the north side of the long table, his attorney beside him. Hazel had eyes like flint and a posture that didn't bend. Adrian looked different. The deep shadows beneath his eyes were gone. His shoulders, once locked tight with tension, had eased. He wasn't wearing a suit. Just a charcoal sweater. He looked like a man who had finally exhaled. When the door opened and Isla walked in, the air shifted. She was thinner. Her hair, once styled in perfect waves, was pulled back into a severe low bun. She didn't glance at the view. She looked straight at Adrian. For 3 months, they'd only existed to each other through emails, PDFs, and legal language. Seeing him in front of her, solid, real, felt like a punch to the chest. She hesitated at the chair across from him, gripping the backrest a second too long before sitting. Adrian, she said. Her voice cracked. Isla. He nodded once. Polite. Distant. The voice you use with a stranger who bumps into you on the sidewalk. The mediation began. The lawyers spoke. Penthouse equity. Art collection. Retirement accounts. It was a steady, lifeless rhythm, the sound of a marriage being taken apart piece by piece. Adrian didn't argue. He let go of almost everything. He didn't fight for the Chagall print. He didn't challenge the furniture valuation. He just wanted it finished. As for the property in Viterbo, Hazel said, glancing at her file, my client has withdrawn the offer. That asset is no longer applicable. Isla flinched. The word Viterbo lingered in the room like smoke. Can we stop? She blurted. Please. I need a moment with him. Her lawyer sighed heavily but said nothing. Hazel looked to Adrian. He stared at the grain of the table for a long moment. Then, barely noticeable, he nodded. The lawyers gathered their files and stepped out. The glass door closed behind them with a dull click. The silence was louder than the rain. I saw the file, Isla said, her voice shaking. I went into your office. I saw the sabbatical letter. The farmhouse. Adrian didn't look up. He traced the edge of a coaster with his thumb. It doesn't matter now. It matters to me, she said, leaning forward. You were trying to save us. And I didn't even know. You didn't ask, he said calmly, finally lifting his eyes. They were clear. No anger. No heat. That hurt more than fury ever could. You were lonely, he went on. I understand that. I worked too much. But you didn't come to me. You didn't fight. You didn't even scream. He paused. You just stepped out. I didn't just step out, she whispered. This was it. The truth she'd been carrying like a weight in her gut. It wasn't just about attention, she said. Or sex. Adrian stilled. He waited. I knew you were good, she said, tears finally spilling over. Solid. Trying. And I couldn't breathe under it. I felt like I didn't deserve a life that clean. Her voice broke. I wanted to ruin it. I wanted to destroy what we had just to see if it mattered. She swallowed hard. That night at the hotel, I wasn't just with him. I was waiting for you to call. I wanted you to catch me. I wanted a crisis because I didn't know how to ask for change. Adrian studied her, absorbing it all. The truth was worse than betrayal born of desire. She had destroyed them out of self-sabotage. She'd set the house on fire to see if he'd carry her out. You wanted a crisis, he said quietly. You got a conclusion. I'm sorry, she sobbed. I'm so sorry. I know, he said. He stood. He didn't take her hand. He didn't offer comfort. But when you burn everything down, he said, you can't live in the ashes. And I can't live there either. He opened the door. Out in the hallway, the lawyers looked up from their phones. We're ready to sign, Adrian said. Isla stayed where she was, frozen at the table. The confession she had spilled moments ago still hung in the air, but it hadn't given her freedom. If anything, it only made her feel smaller, like she was still clutching the match that had started the fire. A marriage doesn't end with a scream. Not really. It ends quietly, with the scratch of a pen on heavy paper, the dull echo of a notary's stamp marking its death. Thud. 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 3 copies. One for him. One for her. One for the state. Adrian put down the pen. He didn't glance at her. His eyes followed the wet ink of his signature. Strange, solitary. His name standing alone felt unfamiliar, almost wrong. It was done. The legal bond that had once been them was gone. Dissolved. Dissipated. Filed away. That concludes the signing, Hazel said softly, her voice precise, professional. The decree will be final in 30 days. Adrian rose. Adjusted his coat. A simple movement, but loaded with the weight of finality. Then he looked at Isla. She hadn't moved. Her gaze was fixed on the page, her fingers knotted in her lap, trying to steady their trembling. Take care of yourself, he said. No anger. No judgment. No forgiveness. Just a simple fact. He didn't wait for her reply. He walked out of the room. Long, steady steps. No glances behind him. No hesitation. No second guessing. Outside, the rain had stopped. The air was sharp, cold, scented with wet asphalt and exhaust. Adrian inhaled, the city's clarity filling his lungs. For the first time in months, the weight pressing on his chest was gone. He headed to his car, unlocked it, slid inside. Where he went next didn't matter. Maybe the airport. Maybe Italy. Maybe a cafe where no one knew his name. The only direction that mattered was forward. An hour later, Isla entered the penthouse alone. She had fought tooth and nail for this apartment, and now it was hers. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, catching dust motes and lazy, golden shafts. The furniture gleamed, the art hung exactly as it had always been, the kitchen island empty, sterile and perfect. It was everything she had ever wanted. And yet it was hollow. Isla walked slowly through the space. Her heels tapped softly on the hardwood floors. She trailed her fingers along the back of the gray sofa, the spines of the books lined neatly on the shelves. Everything was frozen. Preserved. Untouchable. She realized the truth, she hadn't fought for a home. She had fought for a museum. A shrine to a life that no longer existed. The life we used to have, she thought bitterly. In the master bedroom, the bed was made. The way he had left it that morning, 3 months ago, before the betrayal, before the hotel, before everything. The closet doors were open, the space where his clothes used to hang empty and silent. Absolute quiet. No Nespresso machine humming in the background. No rustle of papers in the other room. No warmth. Isla perched on the edge of the bed, staring out at the skyline they had once shared, the buildings he had designed. She had the view. She had the status. She had the life she had wanted. And yet she had nothing.